You have an ability to use the laws of influence to negatively impact people, and Harvey Weinstein did just that. I'm Dr. Dan, I'm a communication and influence coach, and in this video, we're gonna talk about how Harvey Weinstein abused his power and used the laws of influence to negatively impact a lot of women. So one of the things I often do with every client is I teach them about the most important story that they'll ever have and use in their life, and that is the story between their ears, the story you tell yourself. So when I evaluate Harvey Weinstein, the first thing I look at is, what was the story he had to be telling himself? Here's a guy with so much power, and he was almost like a dictator. He got what he wanted, and he would do it at all costs. What this is a story in your head that typically dates way back to your childhood and your upbringing. Clearly there was some problems there. And with Harvey, the story in his head that overrode any sense of moral compass that he had, which by the way, we all have. Even within him, there were times he knew it was wrong. And you may say, well, no, he didn't. They're psychopaths, they don't understand it. No, there is still a moral compass that they had. We've seen this through research. They still have doubts and fears and anxieties and even love and joy and peace to play out the story in their head. And for him, it was, I'm gonna win at all costs. I'm gonna have power at all costs. I'm gonna get whatever I want at all costs. So he used leverage in a very horrible way to blackmail these women. There were specific laws of influence, whether he knew about them or not, that are in play here that he utilized very negatively, which I think are important to talk about so that you can understand the power that you have in your hands and in your voice, but that you can use them for the good. And before I get to those laws of influence, Harvey clearly also set his life around yes people. So he refused any feedback loop, which is a big problem. When you don't have people in your camp that are willing to tell you things in a loving way to help you, that's a big problem. If you found yourself where everybody in your life, including your friends and inner circle, will not confront you, that will be a huge red flag.
Oh boy, another red flag.
There are plenty of other people with power that this happens to. They avoid all feedback by eliminating anybody who would ever confront them. Because when you study the years of Harvey, everybody in the industry knew what was going on. I mean, you can look at documentary and video after video showing that everybody knew it. But the people that would confront him, he just avoided and he ignored and he cut them out of his life. This is the thing that you see with these power-hungry people. So what I want to cover here is there are 6 laws of influence, and Robert Cialdini wrote a book called Influence. Very powerful book. I highly recommend it. I've read it over and over and over again. I use it as a resource often because Robert lists out the 6 most influential laws of influence to get people to know, like, and trust you. And if you're in a business or you're an entrepreneur, this is key. You need to win friends and influence people. And the way you influence people are by utilizing these brain-based strategies that follow laws. That means that if you're dealing with humans, they are at play. And it turns out Harvey also put these into play, but he used them very negatively. When you know these laws, you're responsible.
With great power comes great responsibility.
These laws of influence can give you power over people. The first law that Harvey put in place is the law of reciprocity. This means that when you do something nice for somebody, they feel obligated to do something in return. And so clearly, Harvey had power. Harvey had money. Harvey had an ability to make someone famous or to put them in a movie. So he would befriend them and then he would bring them places, buy them things, and ultimately the law of reciprocity says, I want to give back to you. And what they would end up doing is giving back their time, meeting him in places that played right into his games. Law number 2 is the law of scarcity. This means that the less there is of something, the more valuable it becomes. And clearly, Harvey played this to the max. He would make it known that few actresses ever make it in the industry. And he's right. Few actually do. He swoops in and he explains how that he can absolutely make them famous with one movie because he did have the power. And there was no one else like him. His track record spoke for himself. So he used this law of scarcity, saying that you're not going to make it and I'm your only shot, to make them buy into the idea that maybe this is my ticket. The third law of influence is the law of authority. And clearly he had all that. Harvey had all the power. So he was an expert in his industry. He was known in his industry. He was credible in his industry. And this industry just so happens to make other people very famous very quickly. He would use that authoritarian mentality and his credentials to increase influence over these women. The fourth law is called the law of consistency and commitment. And this is where if I can get you to act a certain way, you'll believe you're that type of person, and then you'll take bigger steps. So if you believe you're someone who eats cookies and you have a little bite, you'll continue to have more bites the more you dive in. And so one thing he would do is he would befriend them, start talking politics, start talking movies, start talking interests that they had, and then he would convince them a little bit that they are that person. They are this actress. They just needed their break. Then they would come into his hotel room and he would have the contracts literally sitting on the desk. They would be sitting on the table and he would show them the contracts. So ultimately he's showing them how close they are. They are this actress, this is them, and then became his ultimate dirty little trick, and that was the fifth law of influence, which is social proof. He would describe all the women that they do know who are actresses and well known and convince them that this is how they got their start. This is what you must do. Everybody does this, obviously alluding to the fact that you're gonna spend time with me and there's no other options. And if you look at some of the interviews with these women, it just makes you sick to your stomach. You can see how this whole story goes. And although from the outside you'll think, how could you get in that position? You start to study this, and he was a master at influence. And he knew how to take his power, leverage it, but do it in the right way, despite the fact that everybody else knew he was doing it. That's the craziest part. Because of his methods and because of his power and because of his communication, he took advantage and he hurt a lot of people. And then the sixth law of influence, called the law of likability. And after he would be with these women, clearly they didn't like him, but at the beginning they did. He knew how to increase that likability with two major things. He would talk to their interest, he would meet them and want to know exactly what they wanted, and then he would show them how he was the path there because of his name on the movies and all his track record with so many other actresses. It is the ultimate example of somebody who will get whatever they want at all costs and will abuse power time and time again. But studying this guy, you can see how he also had a plan. And I'm the first to tell you, I don't think he understood laws of influence. I don't think he understood how communication strategies work. I think this was a very hurt individual throughout his entire life. And he got some power and he got some fame. And in his mind, the story he told himself is that everybody is going to do exactly what I tell them. I have no consequences because I'm above the law, if you will. And when you're there, you will do anything and you will continue to do it. And once you go down that path, you start to understand what this action does, what these words do, what this leverage allows. I mean, just think like, when was the first time when he would decide, I'm gonna put the contract on the table so when they come in, they're gonna see that and I'm gonna point to it and I'm gonna say, if you stay with me, this is all yours. You just have to sign that. It's such a creepy, despicable thing to do. And my heart and prayers goes out to all the women that healing can happen and ultimately that this is a lesson for so many others, both men in the industry with power and both women in the industry who are aware, can feel heard, and know that that's not the path they need to go down. I'm telling you, on a great note, when you actually put these into your business, into your life, into your communication, utilizing the laws of influence will create a level of impact that I believe you've dreamed about. And so I highly recommend reading that book by Robert Cialdini called Influence. All powerful stuff. Listen, I'm Dr. Dan. I'm here to help you become a better communicator and take your message to the masses. If you have a response or a comment, please leave it below. I'll reply back. Dr. Dan, I'm out.